Hello, everyone. A big welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight. So absolutely delighted. And it's so nice to see faces. And yay, thank you guys. It's such a treat. I love seeing whenever faces pop up, or at least your photos. So thank you for being here tonight. And I'm going to be looking down sometimes because that is where you are, and my chat box and my notes. So if you would head over as we're getting started, and I'm just going to put in the chat box just in case anyone missed this, and no big deal if you don't have it, but it's a little worksheet for tonight. Love worksheets. And what I wanted to do is just do a little reflection together too, because, it's been 600 episodes and a long time. So you've got that in the chat box. If you would head over into the chat box and share name and maybe a favorite podcast or a favorite topic. And thank you so much for those of you who had a chance to fill out the survey, because it's really fun to see. I tell you, there's a lot of repetition of what your favorites are. So thank you. And a big welcome to Mr. Mooney here for joining us tonight and getting all the tech set up, which is always appreciated.
And hopefully everybody can hear us and see us and all of that. Okay. Thank you, Linda. That. I get the okay from Linda. I know we're all good.
Yeah, we know we're good. Yeah. Yay. Awesome. So feel free, head on over into the chat box and share. Again, would love to know where you're tuning in from and favorite podcast topic or episode. And I'll go through just a few announcements, and then we're going to do a little centering, a little reflection. And I've kind of broken up. You guys had such good questions. Let me just say, so many good questions. And I've kind of broken this up in similar to the 500th podcast, Soirée, which is like looking at past, present, and future. And then we will end with a toast. So please make sure you have a sparkling libation nearby. I must confess, ours are simply sparkling water. And I'm just going to open up this can because I know I'm going to need more. And so that's what you're in for tonight. Now, as you guys are putting things in the chat box, I wanted to share that you're probably aware, but we have been doing this for 18 years in September, since 2005.
It's crazy. Every time I think about that, I'm just like, how on earth have we done a podcast for that long?
It's craziness. And, the thing is like, back then, and I know I've mentioned this before, but back then we had to explain to people what a podcast was. I mean, frankly, I kind of fully didn't get it either. And I never listened to it, and I never listened to podcasts. But now it's ubiquitous, right? Everybody has a podcast. And it kind of makes me wonder, like, in this day and age, would I start one?
I know. Would you?
I don't know. I don't know that I would. There's so many beautiful, amazing, popular voices out there. So I think I would feel like I would get lost. And yet, when it's 2005 and nobody knows what a podcast is, you're like, sure, I can do this.
I wonder if you would have just jumped straight to video.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. It's just funny to reflect on, right? But over these 18 years, we have had 3.35 million downloads, which is kind of amazing. 600 episodes, obviously. Today is one of them. So thank you for being here. And downloaded in 87 countries just in the past 3 months. That's amazing.
Yeah. And in some really interesting ones too. I should have had the spreadsheet here, but 87. There's only 300 something odd countries, so it's fully 1/3 roughly of the countries in the world. That's it's pretty amazing.
Interesting, huh? I remember someone from, I think it was South Korea, coming to the yoga studio and being like, and this was like 06, 07, right early on in the days, and being like, I listened to your podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, and here you are at the yoga studio from South Korea. It was like super amazing, because you think about the ability to reach so many people beyond like teaching them a yoga class in a yoga studio in Washington, D.C., DuPont Circle.
Yeah. I mean, I think the podcast really broadened the reach of all of your content and all of your stuff. And that's kind of fun. That was it's just one good example of that. Yeah.
Totally. And so, again, and I'll just put over in the chat box once more for people, you do not have to have this if it's not handy or easy for you, but this was a worksheet that was sent out in your latest reminder. And again, if you have it, great. If not, I know a few of you mentioned like, I love the worksheet. So I thought I'd pull one together, but just know a trusty journal and pen works also. And so I'm going to be going through some reflection questions for you. A gentle reminder to please stay muted. And if you have questions or comments, please, please, please put them in the chat box, because I want to make sure I address anything that comes up for you or anything that you would like to share for both of us and our pugs. Gizmo's right here and Mookie's down there, so you may hear from some snoring in the background. And also, and this is just kind of fun, if you have a chance, we took a photo right before we logged on, and share any photos from tonight, hashtag Tranquility du Jour, because it's always fun to see after an event to be like, oh, that was your setup, that was your pet that joined, or whatever it is, your cozy corner in your home. So if you have a chance to do that, would love to see it. And this is some demo graphics that I wanted to share with you based on your survey results. Okay, so I know this is not, reflective of everyone, obviously, but 41% of you have been listening for 10 to 15 years. Like, that's amazing.
I mean, I'm just surprised that it's that high of a number. I mean, maybe I shouldn't be surprised because the content is so darn good, but that's remarkable for podcasting, that people even knew about podcasts that long ago, but to have stuck with the show that long, that's pretty remarkable. So thank you all for sticking with us that long.
Thank you. And then the next highest was 26%, and that's my 1 to 5 years. So welcome to our newbies. And
rookies. You're all rookies. 5 years. You're still a rookie.
And then and then this was the last one, 16%, 5 to 10 year listenership. So again, I just thought I'd share that. I thought that was really interesting data, and I had a nice little pie chart that went with it. So again, thank you all for taking the time to answer that. And it's really nice for me also to just read and hear, what are your favorite episodes? What are the ones you re-listen to? What are you curious about? Because you all, in a way, I feel like we have really grown up together, particularly those of you who have been listening for 5 to 15 years, because we were kind of babies. Now we're not. And so it's just been a really fun evolution and journey. And I feel like that really came out and was reflected in the Hip Tranquil Chick Sweet 16 birthday that we did in November of last year. And thank you for everyone who was able to join. If you missed us, no worries. The replay is over on YouTube, where the replay for this will also live soon. All right, so that is what I wanted to share. And let me just head in and say hello to a few of you and read and share. What are your favorite episodes or topics? Miss Kathy, all the podcasts on self-care. And Kathy and I met in 2007 in Florida. She came to a book signing of mine. Kathy, love you. Long, long journey together. Paula from SoCal, the Sark interviews. Oh my gosh, I love me some Sark. And many subjects, including style, wellness, creativity. Well, Paula, that kind of makes up the entire podcast, so I love that. Allison Boyd in Austin. I feel like you've moved. I love all the French culture-related podcasts. Yes, re-listened when I planned my last Paris trip. I love that. I'm so happy to hear, and there's so much to be shared. I hope that you also found on the /new page of my website all my recommended Paris items. And what I mean by that are places to visit beyond the Eiffel Tower, right? Which we all know that.
A list that keeps growing every time you go.
It does grow. There's so many amazing things. The last thing I found when I was there in the fall was Muséum de la Romantique. Forgive me, French speakers, for my butchering of your beautiful language. And it's a free museum. I couldn't believe it. It was beautiful art and a sweet little garden. You could have tea. Anyway, so I think I added that to the list. Anne from Alberta, favorite topic is self-care. We all love some self-care. Gina, Pittsburgh, the one with Paris to go. Well, Gina, that's because you recommended Miss Paris to go. I don't know if you remember that, but you did like 15 12 years ago. And then we met up with her quite a few times when she lived in Paris. So thank you for that. Julie, California, I can't pick just one. Christine from Kansas City, love the episodes about your long road trip last year. It inspired us to plan a similar trip. You know, Christine, I've heard from a few people about that and that it inspired them to check out certain things in California, along the West Coast. And that makes me so happy to hear.
We've got 2 this year, it looks like.
2 road trips.
Yeah, 2 road trips. I don't know if how much we'll be sharing with the podcast folks, but I'm sure you'll show pictures and whatnot. But yeah, we've got Miami and we've got the Gulf.
Yes.
But hopefully New Orleans.
Yes. Yes. So 2 road trips.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about why road trips. A, we love road trips, but B, we have dogs that require.
We have dogs, folks. Did you know this? Did you know we have dogs? Do we talk about them?
Our world revolves around dogs or dolls, which are like dolls. But it's funny, a friend of mine invited us over to brunch, and I was like, I thank you so much. I think it'd be easier if just you and I met up, because Tim and I can only do things that are with the dogs because we can't leave them home alone, and I get nervous about Kissy in daycare. Anyway, like way too much information. But she was like, okay, let's just meet up. Linda, loved your life stories, journey through studio and handling grief. Grief. Ongoing. Stephanie from Portsmouth, fairly new to the podcast, but have done the seasonal review for a number of years. Thank you. Beatrice, joining from Washington. So glad to listen to you. Delighted to have you. Wonder if Sophonispa's joining us or if she's asleep. Hello, Miss Deborah from Georgia. Favorite. I love that. Someday is today. I brought the book out. I love that. And I'm so glad. And you know what? I tell you, A, it's fairly recent, but B, a lot of you said that. Hello, Ms. Rachel Fort Worth. Podcast focus on life transitions. They're saved in my feed. Yes. Tiffany, enjoy all the podcasts. Creativity, self-care. Jessica, Janice, Jamie, all the Paris-y ones. Sherry, enjoy the podcast. France, you guys like your French stuff. Jamie Cat Callan. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to scroll through these a little bit quicker. Paris, we've got Kathy, we've got Hillary, Allison. Oh, back to Texas after 5 years in California. Wow. And I remember you in Atlanta. Michelle, LA. Yes, Mary Catherine Starr, right? So fun. I don't remember that too funny. Yes, Gina, she was your recommendation. So I love you're like, I love that one. It's amazing. I'm like, I wonder who told me about it. So Finispa's in bed. Hello, Helen from North Carolina. Love book reviews. Well, Helen, you're in the right place because I have a stack of books right here to talk about and share with you. So thank you all again so much for being here tonight. It's a total treat. Yes, Priscilla, and thank you for your email last week. I owe you a response. It's such a treat to have you back from Dubai. Thank you. All right. So let's take a moment and I'll go ahead just once more and put this worksheet over in the chat box for anyone who this might be helpful. And again, no worries if you don't have the opportunity to download it or you didn't, because we will also, pen and paper works great too. So I just thought doing a tiny bit of reflection, really, kind of around our journey through tranquility. So I think most of you know, but my name is Kimberly Wilson. So I'm a psychotherapist here in private practice in Washington, D.C., rescue pug mom, partner to Tim, and writer of some books, and then obviously host of this podcast for nearly 18 years. And, I also like to mention and emphasize, because I had a wonderful podcast interview on Friday, and this will come out in March, with someone who just wrote a book about kind of productivity and calm, which I love the blend. And I shared with him how my definition of tranquility, right, is this quality of calm, but within a full and meaningful life, right? So it's not like just, when everything's smooth, because let's be honest, it's rarely smooth. So it's like, how do we have a sense of ease or calm in the daily drama, right? So that's kind of the whole premise behind this idea of tranquility du jour. And so with that, I think I'm going to skip centering so we can just kind of get going. So just take a few deep breaths, please. And then I'm going to give you my first question. And hey, Tiffany, she was on my podcast. How has listening to Tranquility du Jour podcast impacted me? So I'll just put this in the chat box. But as you think about it, How has listening to this podcast impacted you? I'll just give you a few moments with this, but thinking, however long you've listened, what effect has it had on you? Okay, so I'll leave it there. So how has listening to Tranquility du Jour podcast had an impact on me? And take just a moment to finish this up. And please know that you could spend a little more time with these questions, obviously, but I just wanted to give a little bit of reflection together. And so just a tiny bit of space to explore these. So again, Lexi increased my book budget. Audie, wait till I show you tonight's loot. And so, communal way to reach out. I love it. Yeah, wonderful. And the funny thing that I wrote, and we do not have to share all of our answers to these, but I just thought it was funny. I was like, I don't listen. But the interviews have offered so much inspiration and nuggets of insights because, I'll talk about this in a little bit, but the ability to interview these amazing people has just offered so much joy in my life. Okay, so the next question. How do I infuse tranquility into my day? So again, feel free to just reflect on this a little bit. I'll put that in the chat. Reflect on this for a moment along with, feel free to fill out the worksheet or just put it into your journal. And how do I infuse tranquility into my day? All right, bringing that one to a close. And I hope that you were able to come with like a bulleted list of even just like 5 things that you do on a semi-regular basis that just brings you a bit more tranquility. Okay, so this next question I thought was kind of fun is, what do I picture for myself at the 650th episode? Now, there probably won't be an event for that, right? Because I've been doing it with the annual, centennial?
Yeah. Round, the super round numbers.
Super round numbers. But if you picture yourself really, 50 episodes would be about 2 years. So what do you picture for yourself around the 650th episode? So visualizing yourself in 2 years. What do you picture? Kind of day-to-day experience, maybe something that you want more of in your life, maybe a place you want to live or a road trip you want to take. All right, so what do I picture for myself at the 650th episode? All right, so, some people, right, are big about 1 year visions or 5 or 10. And that's what I was like, it's kind of random, right? To think of in 2 years. So that's like February 2025, right? Karina's like, I picture still being here. We want that. We would love that, Miss Karina. And so my last question for you is, what's my big creative dream? So there's no timeline associated with this. This could be your creative dream for this year. This could be your creative dream for your lifetime. This is something I asked of my coterie participants in January to really think about a creative dream that they wanted to manifest this year. It could be writing a book, right? It could be moving to a new city or going back to graduate school. So I'll give you a moment, but think about, what is your creative dream and any timeline that feels good to you. Awesome. All right, ladies, I hope that's been helpful as you think about, we may have a gentleman or two, I'm not sure, but as you think about kind of yourself and your growth, right, is big creative dream. I said comfortable on point, like really comfortable on point. So we'll see. And if you hear a little whining, it's a chug that just crawled onto my lap. So despite doing all we could to set him up for success, apparently this is what he wants in this morning. So here we go, or in this moment. All right, so I hope that was helpful as you do a little reflection on your own, right? So we've come a long way together, particularly those of you who've been around since September 2005. So I wanted to give a little sneak peek because this was something that was interesting that came up in the discussion, right? When I say discussion, I mean kind of like in the survey. And that was, that was kind of the enjoyment of Tim. I was like, Tim, this podcast, everybody just wants you. But and
I only come every 100 episodes, so it's a rarity.
You're more often. But and then it was also like life lately. So just wanted to get a little peek into it and talk about this for a moment. And Tim, you chime in because you've been part of life lately, obviously.
I have.
So one thing as we speak about Gizmo is I took him to the oncologist last week and he has 10 tumors. So he goes every 6 months. But the interesting thing about it, we hope they're all benign. And, so navigating that, right? We're like, I think he made a new one for you. So he's constantly developing these like little benign mast cell tumors.
Which we used to freak out about a lot, and now it's just like, oh, he grew a new one, big deal. It's really interesting how much more relaxed we have gotten on the subject. Before it was sort of like we must have it removed, and now it's sort of like, no, he can live with them, and he's lived quite a long time and will continue to live quite a long time. So
this is random. I mean, 10, and he turned 15 in December, which is very exciting. And then Tim and I celebrated 19 years last month, and then my dad just became an octogenarian.
That's a lot of years. That's more than 19.
Yes.
He is older than 19 years old.
He's a bit older, 5 times. And but it's our secret, right, Mom? And so, as I've told everyone, he's an octogenarian. I even asked him today, how's it feel to be an octogenarian? Are you sure you don't want to come to Paris? How are taxes going? When are you going to Mexico? And he just wrote back, that's too many questions. I'm like, okay. You're an octogenarian. So anyway, with that, it's just been kind of this interesting evolution. I was home in Oklahoma last weekend to celebrate, which was very sweet. I've been reading a lot, and I do have a list of books to show you, and you can follow along on Goodreads because I like to post there. Sometimes I post...
Oh, I was going to say, are you going to say it? Because I will if you won't.
Sometimes I say I finished a book when I'm really like halfway through.
Or sometimes...
Or a third, but I always finish it. But I just get excited, and so I just want to say I did it.
Yeah.
And it motivates me to finish.
And she does confess to me every single time she does this. But last night, was it this book?
Yes, it was this book.
I mean, she was like 10 pages in, and she's checking it off.
Okay, it was not 10. It wasn't
much more than that.
It was a third of the book, and I was like, here, this is a really lovely book, you guys. How Are You Really? By Jenna Kutcher. Anyway, and so I get excited. I have said I read it, but I have not read it, as you'll see. There's just like, you can't really tell. But there is a third. I'm a third way through, but I will finish it. So take Kimberly's reports of finishing books on Goodreads with a little grain of salt. That's all I'm going to say. I get excited. I'm like, oh. She gets very excited. But when you're reading on Kindle and then you go to Goodreads and you say you finished it, they're kind of like, what? Because they can see, how far along you are with it. But anyway, I get excited. So I've been reading a lot. One other thing is I've been good about my clients is logging off in the evening after them. I'm just recognizing I'm almost 50. I turned 50 this year. And that my energy is like a smidgen of what it used to be. And so rather than continuing to work on other projects in the evening, I find I just have to log off. I'm like gone, done. And that has been an interesting shift, particularly I'd say over the past few months. And then also, I've recently developed a big crush on Harry Styles. Do you guys know him? I think everybody knows him, but I just discovered him this fall. And one of my coterie participants was like, he's joy in a jumpsuit. Isn't that hilarious? Harry's has got a large following of women of a certain age. That's all I'm going to say. There's a Vogue article that's like why women over 40 love him. So anyway, if you're interested, check him out. But I'm dragging my mother, who is almost 80, to Paris to see him for 2 shows in June. So yes, she's very excited, as you can imagine. She's like, who is this? And then the last thing, well, a couple other things I wanted to mention is like, because in a recent love note, I think it was last week's, right? I mentioned it's just a really rough start to the year, like really rough. I don't think I've ever gone through such an intense time that wasn't related to like, selling the studio or something along those lines. So a few things. One is this is silly, but this is, I feel like, what kicked everything off, is I lost this black ring that I have worn for 15 years every day. And that was really hard for me. I don't know. I think my cat knocked it into a box that ultimately went into recycling. And so it's been a journey. But you know what's funny is my therapist felt so sorry for me that she sent me this ring that she had gotten on Etsy years ago and she thought was similar enough. And it is. But I'm like, thank you for saving me. But
you've lost that ring a couple of times through the years, and we've always found it. And I was like, oh, it's definitely going to turn up because it always does. And it has just straight up disappeared. We're just flummoxed by it. So we definitely are blaming the cat.
I blame Jackson. It was definitely Jackson. The other thing was really exhaustion from the holidays. I just never recovered. It was a really exhausting holiday time, and just nothing new, nothing out of the ordinary, but it was a lot of kind of like prep work for the coterie, and which I love my ladies. And, you know, it's just like, I didn't have any downtime and I thought I would. And so I went into the year really kind of falling behind or feeling really behind and exhausted. And I remember, and I never say this to friends or even my mom, I was like kind of hanging on by a thread. And what's crazy is that weekend we got news that a family friend who'd had cancer was just re-diagnosed and given 2 weeks to live. Like, crazy. So you're like, I'm hanging on by a thread because I'm so exhausted. And then meanwhile, this is happening, right? So it was just one of those things that everything was feeling very, very intense. And then two, my hip, which some of you know, I had a hip replacement in July of last year, and it was doing good. Recovery was really good. And then all of a sudden, I feel like it dropped off. And my surgeon said maybe we needed to have something removed that he had put in there because my femur cracked during surgery. Second, third opinion, and then they're like, no, don't ever do that. Maybe we think it's bursitis. So I got cortisone shots. Anyway, so I'm kind of just navigating like the fact that my hip is just not yet come back to what I'd hoped. Definitely is not in the level of pain, but it's still not quite right. So anyway, there was just a lot. And so even as I said in that love note that went out last week, I was like, I feel like I'm coming out of hibernation. And I really do, because it was bad last month. It was really, really hard. And what are we? We're February 20th. And I do feel the mood, it just is a lot lighter. And a few of my friends were like, is it menopause? I'm like, well, I'm sure it is, you know, but I think there's more to it. It's really like situational. So that I just kind of wanted to share, you know, if people are like, where have you been? Because I was kind of MIA. I was still, you know, posting on Instagram and things along those lines. But love notes and being really the ability to write was just removed. And so I say that too, in case you have had a hard start to the year, which I've heard from many people that they have, that it's completely just no, I see you, and that it's hard, and that, you know, hanging in there, like there is light around the corner at some point. And not to be Pollyanna about it, but sometimes it's like we just have to keep moving through, right?
Yeah. It was a lot to handle all at once. And winter is tough. And, you know, it's just a lot. And so it's good to practice what you preach. Little self-care. Some extra baths.
Yeah, I'm all about the baths.
Yeah, no, whatever it takes.
Whatever works.
Yes, 100%.
And the last thing I just kind of wanted to share about life lately is like going to Paris in June, which will be amazing, and taking Mama, which will be great.
2 Harry Styles shows.
Not
that I've noticed or anything.
Yeah, he's like, every time I try to upload a video to YouTube,
oh my God,
it's all Harry Styles. I'm like,
it's like all Harry Styles. And I'm just sitting here going, do we need to have a talk about this? And I'm like, it's fine.
Not really. I mean, he's like 29 years old.
I like the one song.
Yeah.
What's the one song?
As It Was.
As It Was. That's a good song. It was #1 for 14 consecutive weeks. He won a Grammy. He's a very talented man.
Very talented. And if you have not seen the video for Falling, which is my favorite song that he did not play at his concert that I went to in Chicago, I've let that go. But anyway, watch the video. He's in this gown and the water's coming up as he's playing piano. It is so good. Okay, and so Paris, Miami, we're going back for
Yes.
my little ballet performance. So last year we went to an adult ballet festival down in Miami. It was our first year. This will be the second. Really looking forward to that.
Yes.
And so we do a road trip because we can take the puppers. Borneo to finally be in the habitat of orangutans. I'm like so excited.
I tell people this and they're like, she's going where to do what? It's my favorite thing. That you have been talking about doing this for
Years.
how long? Like
Years.
since we first started dating. Absolutely.
I'm obsessed with them.
100%.
And what's great is I'll also be planting trees because you probably know for like with the clothing line, every order that goes out, right? We plant a tree. And so I'm like, I get to actually physically plant trees for these beautiful red beings in Borneo. So excited. I'll be sure to be sharing lots of photos and updates from that.
To go to Borneo.
That's what I'm assuming. And I have a little checkup with my GP, my annual, and I'm going to ask because I assume, because when we went to India, we needed all sorts of things.
Yeah,
so
because this is a very wild place that you're going to, and
it's a 36-hour journey.
it's amazing. I mean, it's quite literally the other side of the world, and it's. I'm excited. I'm super excited to experience it through your photos and videos because I'm on dog duty.
He's like, you can't touch them, right?
Yeah, I was like, you cannot hug the wild orangutans. That is the point.
I hope I can get like a little kiss or something.
No. No. Follow whatever instructions they give you.
I'll follow instructions.
Not the orangutans and not what you think that they want. The human beings that are there for their care. My goodness.
Yeah, and it's really great because this is a nonprofit and this is like they're all about rehabilitation and then also reforestation. So because as we know, palm oil, removing the orangutan habitat, and so there to replant. So really excited. So that's the year that's coming up. Orangutans are professionals. Yeah. The professional thieves. Yes. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. Oh, but they're smart. Yeah. Monkeys are professional thieves. You should have seen them in India, like stealing. It's so funny.
I saw your mom just.
Yeah.
Did you lose anything, Linda? Did the monkey steal from you? All right.
Yeah, you would see them on bridges and you were just like, uh-oh. So from the past, right, I just want to touch on a few things, past, present, future. And I feel like present, I did a little bit of just by sharing kind of life lately. And again, thank you for your patience for those of you who were wondering, like, why isn't there anything on the blog or love notes or whatever? And actually, even a couple of you reached out and were like, I'm not getting your newsletters. I just want to make sure I'm still on your list. I'm like, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I haven't sent anything. So thank you for your patience as I navigated that time. And, from a past perspective, it's just fun to think about the very first episode, which I've sent out in your emails. And I hope it's kind of fun to listen to. But that very first episode was done in Mexico while we were there for a friend's wedding. And I made Tim go into the bathroom so I could record. And it was like I read a script, right? Because I was so self-conscious and I didn't want him around as I talked into a voice recorder. A little machine.
I couldn't even remember what we used. It was like a little one of those. Yeah.
Little vertical kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember that. I may still have it in a drawer someplace.
I think we do somewhere.
Yeah.
I'd record speeches or things like that. Remember with
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Back before like our iPhone that does everything.
And the setup that we've got right now, where we're, we got phones hooked up to 2 computers and, different, much more higher end mics. It's wild what the tech has done.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And the videos. I don't know. Do you guys remember back in the day when the seasonal podcasts were through freeconferencecall.com and we would like be on the phone?
Yeah. But we could record those, right? We made them into podcasts.
Yeah.
The number of different ways that I have produced this particular program, folks, is kind of stunning. And this is the latest way. It's kind of crazy. We are, but just from the technical perspective, since we're on the topic right now, we're talking to you via Zoom. It is actually not routing through Kimberly's account. It's routing through my account over here. And we're using an external camera. We've got 2 external microphones, which I'm using a software mixer for. It's just stunning what we're capable of doing right now to beam this live around the world and to record it audio and video and to be able to make that available down the line. It's It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what's happened in the last 18 years.
19.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Whatever. Now, a lot of you ask about fave podcast episodes, and I shared quite a few in the 500th, so I wanted to share new ones that have happened since the 500th that were my favorites. Someday is today. You guys have mentioned that you really appreciated that. And anyone who missed it, it's episode 593. And with it, he's really, really lovely. Matthew Dix is his name. And he talks about don't put things off until there's a better time, right? If there's something you want to go after, do it. And we also talked about how we'll never be on our deathbed going I wish I'd spent more time on Instagram. I mean, we all know this stuff, right? But he's really good at articulating it. So if you haven't listened to 593, check it out. The other thing, and a few of you have brought this up, is the On the Road 4-part series that we did. And that was 544, 546, 548, and 550. And that was during the journey in 2021. We thought things were getting normal. We'd all gotten our vaccines. And so it was we better get on the road before we have to be back in offices, right? And then, of course, things did not get normal for maybe a year.
But I'm glad we did that then, because I feel that trip wouldn't have been very duplicable. Is that the right word? Yeah. It was the right time and the right everything for that, and it turned out great. Yeah. I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that one.
Yeah, that was pretty good. And he came up with the itinerary and everything. And it was turned out to be 6 weeks. And sweet mom, I was would you be willing to watch Mookie for 2 weeks? And it turned into 5.
Well, we did get her to agree to it beforehand that it was going to be 6, but yeah. But the best part was, you were let's get rid of Mookie. And then as we're pulling away, she's bawling that we're leaving Mookie behind for all that time. But
and Mookie was trying to get into the car. So at that point, we had Bellstar and Gizmo, and they could be alone together, whereas Mookie and Gizmo fight, so they couldn't be alone together. And he's also barky, and we thought in Airbnbs that would not work well. So my parents...
Now I don't care. So.
Yeah. My parents are very sweet to watch him, and... Yeah, but I cried as we pulled away, and Dad just pushed me into the car, and he's go. Mom's he doesn't deal with emotion. I'm yeah. She's holding on to Mookie, and he's so sad. Anyway, so that was a fun series to do, and I'm so happy to hear that it inspired some of you. And then the other one that I wanted to mention, and this one was with Eric Maisel, and I just always love having him on the podcast. And he is a creativity coach and a therapist and has written 45 books. Anyway, it's episode 523, The Power of Daily Practice. Emphasizing, which we all know, but always good to be reminded of, the importance of having a regular practice of nurturing your creativity, self-care, all that good stuff. Okay. The last thing from a past perspective I wanted to mention that you guys brought up is some advice to give younger self. And I really was, I had to think about this, right? Because this is such a great question and something that I think we reflect upon on a regular basis, or we, in journal prompts or things along those lines, we get asked this. And so the things that I wrote down, right? Rest more, which I think probably many of you could relate to that. It's not a big deal. So in psychology, there's this thing called cognitive distortions. And one of them is catastrophizing. I'm really good at that. Oh my gosh, end of the world, worst thing ever. And to recognize, it's not really a big deal. Many things are not really a big deal. And it's good to ask yourself, in 6 months, 1 week, 1 year, will this matter? Right? Some things absolutely, but some of the things that we, maybe you, me, get worked up about will not be a big deal. And the other thing is to be gentle. And when I say be gentle, not so much with others, but with ourselves, right? So I would say that's one thing too, is the importance of just really being gentle and kind. And so you'll see I emphasize that a lot in my work now, of just how to really just be a little softer with yourself, to hold yourself with little tender care. So whenever I think about advice to give younger self, those were the 3 things that really came up for me. And it's funny, a friend of mine, whenever I was visiting in France, she gave me this book, The Art of Rest. And there you go. And I have not finished this yet, but How to Find Respite in the Modern Age. And I do think that rest is just something that is so overrated. You've probably heard about the nap ministry. There's a lot of really wonderful resources out there. And yet, I mean, just so, so important. What about you? Is there anything that comes up as you think about advice that you would give your younger self?
So I've thought about this more than I would have ever thought that I would have. But the biggest thing is, I think, and I said this to Kimberly earlier, I think it would take a lot for my older self to convince my younger self to listen, because I just think that I would resist the concept of somebody coming back in time professing to be me and then giving me this roadmap to like all these wonderful things. So I think it would take a lot of convincing to at the outset, because I know me. I mean, like, even now, if 90-year-old me came back, it's like, I got some things to tell you, I'd be like, okay, sure, whatever, dude. But just I thought about the logistics of things a little bit too. I was like, well, I'm so used to having the ability to look things up on the internet and stuff like that, and like back in the 80s or whatever, I wouldn't have had that capability. So like, how would I tell myself to be able to know when to go to see different concerts or something like that? Look it up in the paper. It's like, so I've even forgotten what it was like to live back then. Yeah. And so like, I feel like the logistics of the whole thing would be, I think I would need to like be living back there for a while to relearn what it was like to kind of like be able to just give the little micro movements. Mm-hmm. And also, just the types of things where what I was into and where my mindset was a very narrow worldview. And I think that imparting a broader worldview, I think, would be very difficult to do. But at the same time, it's like, well, maybe you just tell a bunch of stories and, stuff like that, and hope that all of those sci-fi stories about time travel and revealing the future to your past self doesn't blow up the universe or whatever. I don't know. Well, Hopefully all of that is cool in this scenario. But I think that there's certainly a lot of choices that maybe I would have been like, hey, think more broadly about things. And maybe that's because I've seen plays on this thought experiment where it's like you're allowed to say 3 words. And then there's a lot of people who are like, buy Apple stock or something like that. I'm like, okay, well, maybe we can do better than that. Right. But anyways, I just always think that these are interesting thought experiments, but it's also a good reminder that the future is also now. Mm-hmm. And sort of like, so, going back to tell your past self something, it's important to live that reality in the future and what you do going forward, because unless the AI has invented time travel, this is a thought experiment, not a reality. So it's better to think about what you can do to improve things for your here and now going forward.
Doesn't he sound like an attorney? I'm like, that is the most analytical response to this question.
Well, it's more me being a Virgo than an attorney. Trust me on that.
So present. So one thing that a lot of people asked about is kind of day in the life, and Tim can definitely speak to this also, but let me just give you an idea. So we have 3 rescue pets. None of them get along. We have a cat that torments our dog that has anxiety. And then the cat also torments the other dog because he's fragile and likes to knock him over and lick him and bite his ears and things like that, right? And then the 2 dogs, of course, don't get along. So navigating that in 600 square feet, I'm just going to say it's not easy. I would say too, my big thing a day in the life is ballet. I try to get in ballet every day. And if I'm being good, I try to do my PT exercises. Lots of tea, matcha lattes. And my clients, love seeing clients. I see them 4 days out of the week. Of course, the coterie, which is a regular experience. Not quite daily, but almost, and definitely connecting daily in our circle community. So love this experience. The blog, podcast, social media for you all, the Tranquility du Jour community as a whole. And then the other thing I wrote down is almonds and unsweetened cranberries are my new thing. Yeah, I'm obsessed.
Yes, that's 2023. That's Q1 2023. Raw almonds, unsweetened cranberries.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, they're so tart, you guys. Skip those sweetened ones. These are so, so good. So it's like my go-to snack. Even we were at the ballet yesterday. We saw Romeo and Juliet. I had my little snack bag. Like I literally carry a snack bag. And yeah, so that's my little thing. So the piece here, I thought this was interesting, is like, okay, how are you dealing with the challenges of aging in a youth-oriented culture? And what do you find are the gifts of aging? Such a good question. So it's funny, youth-oriented. I mean, I think of the importance of really aging gracefully, right? So what does that look like for you? What does that feel like for you? For me, it's definitely trying to stay as agile as possible, despite the fact that almost all of my joints are in regular pain. And, it's like also how to keep challenging myself and learning, right? So it is tricky in a culture obsessed with not aging, but I kind of love the look. I love the look of people as they age and the way in which they continue to show up in the world. And I have to say, I think women get braver and braver, more and more moxie, like they lose their filter. And there's something kind of magical about that. Is there anything for you that you think about with regard to aging and what you're noticing? Yeah. Oh, will we talk retirement, which we've never talked really before?
And I think that's like recent too, because it's sort of like once you turn 50, then it's like, oh man, I'm on the other side. Like retirement is a real conversation piece, and preparing and then thinking realistically, okay, well, what do I want to do 10, 15 years from now? And this is real, actual, this isn't hypothetical anymore. So I think that's kind of interesting. But I think from an aging perspective, it sort of feels like this could be flipped wrong. It's thinking that you're trying to stay younger by being more active and working out and eating healthier. But from my perspective, as I see people in my family aging, for much further down the path than me, it's trying to make sure that I can be as active and engaged and everything for as long as possible. And so it's not trying to battle aging so much as to kind of make it so that the next 20 to 30 to 40 years are as comfortable as possible. That's kind of where I'm at. And, I've been paying more attention to various elements of my health over the last 6 to 12 months. And I feel like it's starting to pay off a little bit. And hopefully this time it will catch and take and stay that way. So,
well, it's tricky when you reach middle aged, so to speak, right? Because you realize like I have lived more years than I'm going to live. And I think that's a bit of like a bit of a shocker, right? So the piece too that came up here is people asking about midlife and in general, and one thing I wanted to mention with regard to midlife is I definitely see my direction with Tranquility du Jour, with, oops, Gizzy's falling off his little bed, with Tranquility du Jour, with things that are going to be coming down the pike, is very much focused on midlife. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be a Gen Zer or a boomer and still get things out of what I offer, but I think so many of us really have grown up together, and so it's kind of fun to be exploring this journey together and really highlighting and focusing on where we are. The other question was like biggest or favorite personal takeaways or benefits from having done 600 episodes. And what I wrote here is connecting with my favorite authors, artists, activists, and being able to share it with you. I mean, that's just been huge, huge, huge. And this what I thought was really interesting too. What is some inspirational wisdom you can give us to keep going, or maybe even get us started? It is refreshing to follow you because there's no obsession to grow to 1 million followers, live your best life, turbo power your midlife business. There is so much noise around that sort of thing, and you have kept going without following that path. And the question also came up similar to this, was like how to keep moving forward and also juggle many things, which I'm sure many of you can relate to because I know you all have a ton on your plates also. And the piece that came to me as we think about inspirational wisdom to keep you going and or to keep moving forward is really my big thing is planning. And I mean that in the big sense, right? So yes, of course, the weekly, your most important task, like what it is you want to do for your week. And I did a video in January on setting your week up for success. But it also comes down to monthly dreams, seasonal dreams, and definitely annual dreams, and so it might be like, oh, whatever, who has time for that? I totally hear you. And yet, even if you just set one, like that question I asked you, what is a creative dream? Like, is there a way that you can take a step toward making that a reality this week, this month, this year? So that's what I would say is inspirational wisdom, I hope, that will help you keep going, and not to be like you have to have everything project managed, right? But there is something about getting clear on what it is you want. How do you want to show up in the world? What do you want to leave with this world? I mean, can you imagine like this family friend who was told basically, yes, we see on the scans, you have terminal cancer, which he beat twice, and there's nothing we can do. So it's palliative care and you've got about 2 weeks. I mean, can you imagine being told that? Like, oh my gosh, right? So things like that, I think, really help put things in perspective of what can I do today to make a difference?
You said planning. I would also say prioritizing.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things that kind of come across my plate that, offers to do X, Y, or Z. And oftentimes, even though they might be very interesting, I will often turn down things because, I want to do other things more than that. Mm-hmm. And because my value set is to do other things. So yeah, I've turned on a few things in the last year or two that might have been good for my career or might have been good otherwise. But yeah, no. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing to remember. And I'm just going to pull these other books that I wanted to share in just a moment. But the piece is when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else, right? So if you're like, yeah, sure, I can take on this extra project at work or whatever, it's like, is that going to cut into the creative or volunteering, sort of processing and time that you wanted to have? So I think it's a great thing too that happens at midlife is a ongoing reevaluation of energy, because honey, it is not the same as it was when we were younger.
Yeah.
And the next thing is got a lot of questions about future, and so I just want to touch on that because we just have a few minutes left. So private practice, continuing that, love my clients. I don't think I will retire. I will just keep doing this. It's so meaningful to me. I love the work. Ballet for sure. One thing that I'm super excited about, you guys, is the Ballet Core capsule, which is currently with a professional ballerina in Paris getting photographed. I cannot wait to share this with you. So on April 1st, mark your calendar. Would love to have you there for the launch. If you go to KimberlyWilson.com/TDJ-style, you will find it, and it will soon be on the front page of the website.
You haven't shared any of those pictures that I've seen yet.
I haven't shared any of those photos.
You all are you're gonna lose your minds. I'm telling you.
Oh my gosh. And even if you're not into ballet, I mean, honestly, it's just
cool.
like, it's super cozy and comfy.
Yeah.
And then next book. So a few of you asked about the memoir, how it's coming, why I'm writing it. So I will say I've been working on this memoir for 9 years now, and it's shifted, it's morphed, and the big thing that it's really kind of morphing into now is taking a lot of my memoir stories and turning it more into like a midlife kind of how-to. So stay tuned for that. It continues to evolve, but I'm feeling good about it. And I had draft 2.0 done, and then I was working on the book proposal, and it just wasn't gelling for me. And so my book coach, Jamie Cat Callan, and I came up with this idea of like morphing it into the next book, which you all requested and gave me pretty much the table of contents for, and Hip Tranquil Chick, why is that a tongue twister after 16 years, but in the 16-year event. So thank you for that. And this last thing I thought was really interesting. I get the sense you're taking on perhaps starting to talk about female midlife is interesting, not in bits falling apart and the woe is me HRT way, no judgment, a celebration of how it's a second act. And I just want to emphasize, and I love that, I think Rachel even brought that up, of how she appreciates the podcast on transitions, right? Of thinking about the evolution of our lives, and that we are constantly almost like a snake, like shedding its skin, and to recognize that's a good thing. our ongoing evolution, even though it's uncomfortable, A, and it's uncomfortable for those around us, B, it's really, really important. And so thinking about like what's working for me now, what's not working, and is there any shift that I can make? So in closing, and I will look in the chat box to see if there's anything that I missed. And you guys, again, submitted so many wonderful questions. So I've just been able to touch on some of the ones that repeated themselves. So I hope it's been helpful. And I'll use some of the others to pull together future podcasts where it's just me talking and musing, and then also to, do blog posts and things along those lines. Because I do plan on doing some micro courses this year, and the micro course is definitely one on mental health, and also 1 or 5 on the different tenets of Tranquility du Jour: style, mindfulness, creativity, compassion, and wellness, each as its own micro course. So just look for these. They'll be coming down the pike. I'm really, really excited about sharing those with you. Anyone dealing with pet loss or anticipated pet loss, or you lost your pet 10 years ago and you're still struggling, I see you. It's hard. And tomorrow night I have a free event. So it's not like group therapy or anything. It's more of me psychoeducation, giving resources, and also you having the opportunity to share your pet story if you would like. So that's tomorrow. You can find out more information about that over on the website. And if you just go down to the very bottom, pet loss support. Also, April 1st, save the date for the release of the ballet corps capsule. And then the next virtual retreat, so kind of gathering where we really dive into looking at the season, that's going to happen on April 15th. So if you're interested, join the waitlist for that. Would love, love, love to have you. And a big thank you to those who support it regularly. Paula, I see you and appreciate you. So those were the main things that I really wanted to share on, like, what is coming, what's coming down the pike. And a few of you asked of, like, what's going to be different on the podcast, or what do you see for the podcast? Will there be a 601? Yes, there will be. It's already planned out. I already have the interviews. And one of the interviews that I mentioned earlier, that I'm like so excited about this guy. And I told him, I was like, I don't usually have men on the podcast. He's like, I can't believe that I'm a token white male. Like, I'm a white male and I'm a token on your podcast. I was like, yes, like, it's like you are a rarity.
Had a good run.
Yes.
Or a bad run.
Or a bad run.
Had a bad run.
But he wrote this book I'm so excited to share, How to Calm Your Mind, Finding Presence and Productivity in Anxious Times. So he's coming up. I think you guys are going to love him. Now, this is a book that I am... and just with that too, I wanted to say that I may transition into seasons at some point, but I'm so used to doing the every other week format that I don't necessarily see that changing. So those of you who asked for episode 601, yes, it's coming. It is coming down the pike. This is another book that I want to read. And again, it gets a little fuzzy, but Life Reimagined: The Science, Art, and Opportunity of Midlife. A friend of mine just started reading it, recommended it, and I'm like, it has been on my bedside for a year. So I'm going to pick it up. Lots of science in it. This is just a fun book. Legendary authors and the clothes they wore. It does not want to. Anyway, legendary authors and the clothes they wore. Like, how fun is that, right? And Terry Newman, and there's a photo of Joan Didion on it. You can kind of see it there. Okay, this is a book that is really interesting from a therapeutic standpoint. It's called No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz. Now, this book I have not read yet, but I'm really excited. Healing Trauma and Restoring Wholeness with the Internal Family Systems Model. People love this theory of therapy, forward by Alanis Morissette, who's going to actually be at the therapy conference that happens every year here in DC. She is like a keynote. But IFS is this idea of like recognizing all these different parts of who you are, and there's no bad part. That the different parts are there to teach you something. So interesting. This book I'm loving, and I am reading, have not finished, The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control. This is written by a therapist in New York City. And what I really like about this is fellow perfectionists out there. You'll take a little quiz, find out what type of perfectionist you are. And she basically gives you permission to be a perfectionist and kind of, I don't know if she would say she says this, but really enforces it almost as like a superpower of sorts. So I love that because all the books out there are like, don't be a perfectionist, let it go, right? And this is like, hey, embrace it, but here's how to work with it.
She's zagging. Everybody's zigging and she's zagging.
Zagging. And then the last thing, this was recommended by a client. I have not read this yet. The Book of Boundaries. So this is Set the Limits That Will Set You Free. This is written by the woman who did Whole30. Again, I don't know much about her at all, but a client said that she was really loving this book. So of course I got it. So anyway, I just wanted to share these books with you of what am I reading. Tiffany just finished it. I'm curious if you like it. The Art of Rest by Claudia Hammond. It's a really lovely book. And yeah, here's my stack. So I'm not going to hold it up again.
She's read at least a third of every single one of those.
Yes, but I probably said I've read them all. But no, I really haven't. But anyway, a big thank you to everyone for coming out tonight and for supporting the 600 episodes. And let me just see, like, if there's anything in the chat box that was a question that I need to answer, because I do not. I've already held you over. And I want to make sure I saw a spot for episode you recorded in Pittsburgh. Yes. And thank you for co-hosting that event with Lexi. And Tammy, blessed by God to have another day with the people we love. Yes. I love that aging has made me more assertive. Yes, yes, yes. Life quality is key. And just finished that book. Beautiful. Ratings. So yeah, I can totally relate. Okay. Regarding the beginning of the year. Yeah. It's been tough here. I just want to pull up so I can see your photos. If you guys would be willing to, if you're willing to unmute yourselves, and we'll do a little toast before we close. So would love to see, can I start video for me? So that, or does it not matter?
It doesn't matter because you're right there.
Oh, okay. It's confusing. All right. So 2 more years and moments of everyday tranquility. Thank you guys so much for being such an important part of Tranquility du Jour. Look at you drinking. I love it. And for being with us tonight. It's such a treat and an honor. And I also just want to say, if you have any specific questions I did not answer, do not hesitate to reach out. All right. Okay. Cheers, everybody. Cheers. Thank you for being here and wishing you the very best in the week ahead.